Hi there, and welcome to another episode of AskTom. My name's Tom Whitlock. I'm a business development consultant for Clifton Asset Management. We're a team of financial advisors, pension specialists, and the experts behind the commercial finance option known as pension-led funding. In today's episode, I was very pleased to be joined by Ajaz, director at Focus Financial Solutions and star of his own YouTube channel, which focuses mainly on property investment. We took the time out to talk about all things pensions and property and how those options stack up for people at retirement. Without further ado, let's join the interview now. Great. So Ash, do you want to introduce yourself first of all for the people at home?
Sure. So I am Ajaz. I'm the director of Focus Finance Solutions. We are a commercial finance brokerage firm. For myself personally, I've been in the financial industry for over 10 years. I also, as Tom mentioned in the intro, have my own YouTube channel, which is focused around property and finance, and every week on Thursday you can catch the Property Focus News, where I recap the top 5 property news of the week. So in our busy lives, when we don't have time to read newspapers or watch the news or whatever, I try and condense those top 5 news within a 2-minute clip, so you get sort of the highlights and the main bits. So just trying to help and share the knowledge, and that's me in a nutshell.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Well, you're a great person to have on for this interview here, to join us to speak about all things pensions and property for retirement. We've spoken on this channel at length about what you can do with your pension fund, but never too much around the property side of things. So it'd be really good to get your thoughts on what you believe is probably the biggest pro and probably the biggest con of using property as a retirement vehicle.
Sure.
We'll then look at sort of the comparisons to that with pensions and hopefully come to some sort of friendly solution as to what is the optimum for clients.
Sure. I was going to say to both our audiences, this is not a debate or who wins or what's better or whatnot. It's just a conversation just to add to their knowledge and perhaps help them decide, because a lot of people, that's the biggest dilemma they have. Should I invest in pension? Should I invest in property? What should I do? So I'm hoping after this video, after watching this episode, we will help some people.
I'm sure we will, and I'm sure the solution will probably lie between, the extremes of one end and the extremes of the other. There's probably a happy medium in the middle, and I'm sure in the process of this video we're going to find it. Just to kick things off, Ash, let's sort of start with the default position we have here on AskTom. We tend to sort of speak about the values of pension funds and the way that they can be accessed. And I'd certainly say for many people out there, the flexibility of access to pension funds, both at and pre-retirement, can be one of their biggest strengths. We talk a lot about the abilities of people when they reach retirement to access their funds in different ways. So traditionally, where people would pay money in through their working lives, invest in the markets, hit 65 and buy an annuity, that's a very well-trodden path and one that works for a number of people, but it's certainly not the only way that you can actually access those funds in retirement. For many people, they'll take a more flexible approach through something called income drawdown, where the pension fund actually remains invested in the markets, so continues to hopefully receive growth from that exposure. But along the way, some of those funds are being liquidated and sent to the pension holder to act as income in retirement there, as well as the obvious tax efficiencies when they're putting the money into the pension fund. When they tend to be drawing it, they're often doing so at a time where their income is not bearing a lot of tax burden for them. So those funds are often taken with a very low amount of tax out of the pension fund. That's all about when you reach retirement, but of course there are a lot of things you can do with your pension fund before that stage. Of course, in 2015, we saw some changes with regards to the pensions freedom legislation, which allows people to access their pension funds in full once they hit 55, soon to be 57, but for the time being, at least at the time of recording, that's 55 at the moment. And that typically involves individuals having access for up to 25% of the value of their pension fund completely tax-free, that they can take as a cash lump sum, which they can use as they see fit in their personal lives. That's very much for individuals. What they can do prior to retirement with the flexibility that a pension provides is seemingly endless. If they're business owners, they can use those funds and invest and grow their business. If they're potentially involved in commercial property, there may be some ways they can use their pension fund to invest in a piece of commercial property for investment purposes. And indeed, they have access to funds which can include tens of thousands of businesses across all sectors across the planet. And for me, that flexibility is just not matched in any other investment vehicle that exists. Ash, I'm sure you've got some great pros around property, and I'd love to hear how they stack up.
Well, as we were discussing in prep for this, we can sit here and talk about so many pros and so many cons, but time is limited, and we don't want to overload people with the information. So the pro that I picked personally is that by investing in property, you create another stream of income, which is your rental income. And again, by investing in property, whatever age you are, you can kind of create that, and it can take a bit of pressure off of you, from your daily life, whether you're employed or self-employed, but just creating that income. You may need that income to use for your day-to-day lives, or it could be going into a holiday fund or whatever it is for, but it just, creates that income. And that figure can grow with time, because as we have seen, and especially in recent times, the demand for rental property has been through the roof. And the rental figures, when you look at average rental figures all over the UK, the figure has been going up. So the rents have been going up. Yep, the property value in general has been going up. The demand for people purchasing the properties has gone up. But not everybody can go out and purchase a property, so they have to rely on renting. For quite some time. It's not ideal if someone can go out and just buy a property when they're 25 or even 30. I think some people have to wait because of how expensive buying property is, and the affordability criteria and the restrictions and things like that from the lenders. So, as an investor, as a property investor, that creates a real opportunity if you're investing in a property and you're generating another income for yourself, and that can grow. The rent can grow in 10 years, 20 years time, depending if you want to hold on to that property long term. And then if we're looking at it from the retirement point of view, that's again a stream of income alongside the pension you could be getting. You could be getting like sort of rental if you want to combine the two, or if someone who doesn't do pension just want to rely on investing in property, that's an investment that could generate you good income for you long term.
Absolutely. Well, some certainly very positive points there. Like Ash said at the start of this isn't a debate. We're not here to find out the right answer, because of course it's going to be different for every single person based on their own circumstances. And I think it's only fair that if we're having this conversation, that of course we do look at some of the weaknesses of each position as well. And I'll start with pensions. With the sort of reduction in the availability or the propensity for companies to offer final salary or defined benefit style pension funds, where your retirement income would be driven by the number of years service and the salary that you retired on, or as is more common now, an average of your salary across your career. It meant that the people could retire knowing what their income would be, and if there was a shortfall in the investment values, that would have to be topped up by the employer. Nowadays, however, defined contribution schemes or money purchase schemes are certainly much more common, and that involves people putting in money normally from their paycheck into their pension fund. Their employer puts in some money as well. The government also tops it up with some tax relief, but ultimately those funds will then be invested in most often third-party companies. And market crashes do happen. They can happen at the absolute worst possible time. There are, of course, measures you can take that if you are reaching retirement, you may not want to have so much exposure to third-party markets, and kind of working with a good team of financial advisors, I'm sure I could suggest a few, can certainly help mitigate some of those risks. But it is ultimately a risk. There are any number of people that put money into a pension fund, they get in the completely wrong funds, and ultimately they don't see that return in the same way that they may have done had they invested elsewhere. But again, I think if you put the work in early enough in your retirement planning, you can get the right pension, the right investment plan, work with the right advisor, and hopefully end up with a plan that sees you all the way through retirement without that bumpy road being too bumpy. Ash, what about with property? What are some things people should be looking out for, or at least thinking about when looking at using that as a retirement vehicle?
I mean, if we're looking at the cons, one of the biggest cons or disadvantages with investing in property has happened sort of in the last 5, 6 years, and how the government, the things that government has brought in more around taxes and claiming of expenses, which kind of discourages a lot of people. So some of the things that have happened in the last 5, 6 years, one of them, the key one, is the additional stamp duty, land tax. So if you're buying your second property, you're going to pay additional 3% tax, which does put off a lot of people. For example, I had a client which I was talking to last week. They've been wanting to invest in property for the longest time because they've been trying to search. And they rang me and they said, just help me with this. Have I corrected stamp duty correct? And they said, I said, what have you calculated? I said, I'm calculating stamp duty. I'm going to pay something like £30,000. For those of you who are thinking, what, £30,000? But they own a home in London and they want to buy another rental property in London, so the values are quite high. So yeah, I was like, yeah, that sounds about right. And they're like, my God, £30,000. I'm just going to hand it over to the government. That just sounds ridiculous. So that's one of the things that can be a con, which can put people off. Another thing is more around sort of tax. So again, in the recent times, there's been a big debate whether to buy the property in your personal name or a limited company. And a lot of people are now turning to buying properties in limited company. What I've noticed is, so with personal tax, obviously, with rental income that's coming in, depending on where you are, self-employed, employed, that can push you into a high rate tax bracket sometimes. And again, then you'll be liable for paying tax on that additional income. So that's something, when people buy property in their own name, that can put people off. So a lot of people are moving towards sort of limited company, but then again, there's taxes there. I'm not a tax expert or advisor. It's just based on what information I've seen. So that's, again, a lot of the time confuses people, first of all. And because of the confusion and how complicated it can be, it can, sometimes put people off. One of the other things, though, in the recent times, which the government has done, is you used to be able to claim interest you pay on your mortgage as expense if you own the property in your personal name. But over the last sort of 5 years, that has been taken away slowly from the people. And now you can't really claim that interest back as an expense if you own the property. So that's one of the other cons. My cons are more around sort of the tax, the expenses, more around sort of tax and how hard the government is sort of making by bringing in these things, which is really discouraging a lot of times people to invest in property more and more.
Well, it's quite interesting, Ash. I mean, a lot of those changes that you've sort of noted that have happened legislatively to sort of discourage the property investment side of things, you've almost seen the complete opposite happening in the pension space, where people are being encouraged through auto-enrollment to start pension funds very young. So it gets people used to paying into a pension fund in their late teens or early 20s. Whereas previously people may not have started until they're potentially more settled in their 30s and starting to think more about retirement there, which I think is a really good practice for a lot of people. If they're getting in the process of saving for their retirement when they're very young, it will hopefully feel a lot less painful as they go, and it'll give them the chance to build up a bigger pension and have a better retirement when it comes to it. But yeah, we're seeing a lot of changes legislatively that are sort of trying to encourage people to use pensions more, whether that's at the expense of property, who knows. We'll probably see or learn more in 20 years' time. But yeah, I think it's been a really interesting look at some of the differences in probably the two most common ways that people fund their retirements, and they are very different ways of doing it. I'm sure there's a lot of crossover that we can discuss in future videos, but we'll get to that when we get to it.
Sounds really, really good. Thank you so much, Tom. I think it's been good, and I hope from having this short conversation, we have helped a few people, and hopefully we can bring them more stuff around this topic, which is a hot topic: pension versus property.
Absolutely. And if you're watching this at home and you think this has been useful, or if you'd like to see us put together more videos where pensions and property might be the topic, do please feel free to get in touch. I'll make sure links to both Ash's channel and as some contact details are listed below in the video description. But for now, Ash, thank you very much for your time. I'll leave this for now.
Thank you so much, Tom.
Well, thank you very much for your time, Ash, for sharing your thoughts, and for your time at home for hopefully enjoying the interview there. If you found what we've discussed there interesting, do make sure you subscribe to both my channel. We'll put a link to Ash's channel in our video description as well. We'll also put some contact details in there, so if what we've discussed is relevant for you, or perhaps a client that you're working with, please do get in touch and we'll see what it is we can do to help. For now, thank you very much for your time. Remember to like the video, to subscribe to the channel, and to tune in every Thursday morning for another episode of Ask Tom. Take care and goodbye.